Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States and more, and one of the first podcasts on the internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for a release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1411 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The Dayton Hamvention 2026 award winners have been announced. We will tell you who the lucky winners are. It is not too soon to start planning for ARRL Field Day 2026, and the league has a few tips for you. The ARRL Spring Section Manager nominations have been announced. We will introduce you to them. The World Radio Sport Team Championship Committee has announced that national flags and symbols will not be permitted at this year's event. The Voice of America leadership gets ruled against in federal court. The FCC draft notice of proposed rulemaking proposes to open up spectrum for what it calls weird space stuff. NASA reveals who the astronaut is that needed to get evacuated for medical reasons from the space station. Amazon reports that several of its data centers in the UAE and Perrine were damaged by drones during the ongoing war. Australian amateurs face higher government fees for having amateur gear on federal lands. Club Log adds to its roster of volunteers. The state of Tennessee approves credentials for amateur radio technician licensees. And the Hurdy-Gurdy Museum of Amateur Radio is back on the air. We will tell you all about that and a lot more in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Ben Shop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio experiences a little setback on one project in an episode he calls One Step Forward, Three Steps Back. Our own amateur radio historian Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another new edition of Dead Electrical Dudes. This week, Will looks at the life and times of Volta. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio facility here in once again chilly Albany, New York, I'm George, W2XBS.
Reporting from beautiful Bradenton, Florida, where intermittent thunderstorms are wreaking havoc on both my golf game and POTA activities, I'm Mike Nicolich, K9DX Mike.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
And reporting from our news bureau in Wisconsin, where spring briefly showed up, waved hello, and winter immediately tackled it back into the snow. Hams across the state are adjusting antennas and wondering why they didn't stay on 20 meters where it's always warm. I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
Reporting this week from our news bureau in downtown Syracuse, New York, from ham radio station K2MST inside the Museum of Science and Technology, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from the Ham Shack TV studios in Knoxville, Tennessee, where bring on the warm weather. It's a beautiful 80 degrees here in East Tennessee. I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where we're getting ready for spring, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where it's snowing fit to beat the band with 50-mile-an-hour winds at the moment. So much for spring. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where snow is once again in the forecast, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Isn't spring just around the corner?
Hello, everyone. Before we get into this week's newscast, I'd like to tell everyone that This Week in Amateur Radio now has its own Discord server. That's right, a place online where we can discuss everything technology and amateur radio. So join us. Just go to Discord on your computer or download the Discord app on your portable device and search for TWIAR or This Week in Amateur Radio. We look forward to seeing you on the new This Week in Amateur Radio Discord server.
Dayton Hamvention has announced its 2026 awards. The Technical Achievement Award goes to Robert Famiglio, K3RF. Robert B. Bob Famiglio, K3RF, has spent almost 60 years in amateur radio, blending technical expertise, legal knowledge, and leadership in emergency communications. Licensed at age 13, Famiglio later earned a BSc in electrical engineering and a doctorate in law. For more than 40 years, he has served as volunteer counsel, advising hams on PRB-1 matters, zoning and antenna ordinances, RFI enforcement, and club governance. His technical understanding of station engineering and interference resolution has informed effective legal strategies and regulatory comments. Famiglio served in many ARRL leadership roles, including EPA Section Manager, Atlantic Division Vice Director, and later Director. He also served several terms as Vice President and General Counsel of the Radio Club of America and functioned as Corporate Counsel for the board. In emergency communications, he served as Amateur Radio Emergency Service District Emergency Coordinator for Greater Philadelphia, supporting regional response agencies by applying technical expertise, message handling skills, and interoperability between amateur and public safety systems. His formal training as a professional firefighter enhanced his ability to align ham radio technology with operational needs of served agencies. A longtime mentor, Famiglio supports on-air training nets and club programs stressing technical competence, regulatory literacy, and readiness for public service. He believes that amateur radio's core value lies in the skills, service, and technical capability of operators, not merely spectrum access, and he has worked to translate complex technical issues, spectrum coexistence, interference mitigation, and regulatory compliance into clear, actionable recommendations for policymakers. His blend of engineering, legal acumen, and emergency response experience has encouraged continuous training, lowered barriers to participation, and inspired new generations of ham radio operators. The Amateur of the Year award goes to Dr. Jose Otis Vicens, NP4G. Dr. Vicens was born and raised in Humacao, Puerto Rico. He was first licensed at the age of 16 and is the only amateur radio operator in his family. Vicens studied biology at Purdue University, where he became active with the W9YB Purdue University Amateur Radio Club. He graduated from the University of Puerto Rico School of Dental Medicine and completed a specialty program in pediatric dentistry at Brookdale University Hospital and Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. In 2008, Vicens returned to his hometown of Humacao to begin practicing orthodontics. One of his early memories of service through amateur radio was in 1998, when Vicens helped provide communication support in Puerto Rico following Hurricane Georges. During the 2017 Puerto Rico hurricane disasters, he helped coordinate amateur radio emergency communications across eastern Puerto Rico. Vicens recalled attending the DX Forum at Dayton Hamvention, where presentations on major DXpeditions inspired him to someday be part of future adventures. He has now participated in many DXpeditions from all over the world, including Bouvet Island, 3Y, and most recently as team leader for KP5/NP3VI, the Desaseo Island DXpedition of 2026. He is a past president of the Puerto Rico Amateur Radio League and is currently president of the International DX Association. The Special Achievement Award goes to Martha Fell, N3QBE, and Joe Fell, W3GMS. Martha and Joe Fell's journey began in 1966 when Joe earned his novice license, WN3GMS, at the age of 14. Shortly thereafter, he met Harry Davis, W3FDY, who is now a silent key, who mentored him for 4 years. Harry taught him to think critically, design circuits, and execute projects with precision. His guidance was life-changing, and Joe pledged to honor his request to give back to others, just as Harry had done for him. To fulfill this promise, Joe chose to retire at the age of 56, following a 34-year corporate career and the successful launch of his own company. The success of this mission is thanks to his wife, Martha, whose dedication to overseeing administration and logistics has greatly benefited their students. Their program's reach has grown significantly over the decades. In 1976, Joe designed and built a repeater for his mentor's radio site, which remains operational 50 years later, serving a group of approximately 85 operators. Their weekly technical net has become a primary resource for both new and seasoned amateurs, including many professional electrical engineers. Today, Martha and Joe Fell mentor students of all ages and interests. While their first student is pursuing a PhD in electrical engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, their youngest student started at just 8 years old. And finally, the year of the club goes to the Long Island CW Club, or LICW. Long Island CW Club is an online Morse code training community built to help hams become confident and proficient CW operators. The club emphasizes high standards alongside a welcoming culture, focusing on teaching practical operational skills while fostering mutual respect and a spirit of learning for fun. LICW offers structured classes from beginner through advanced, a wide range of topical forums and practice resources that help students move from copying characters to true conversational flow. Instructors are volunteers who remember what it felt like to be new and who coach students through plateaus with clear, effective teaching methods, encouragement, and accountability. LICW includes strong participation and leadership across generations, including more than 400 women who serve as instructors and club leaders, along with programs that support youth and hams with disabilities. LICW is a community where people show up for each other, celebrate progress, and share the joy of CW on the air. The 2026 Dayton Hamvention will be held Friday, May 15th through Sunday, May 17th, 2026 at the Greene County Fair and Expo Center, 210 Fairground Road, Xenia, Ohio.
It's not too early to gear up and get ready for ARRL Field Day. With more on planning your field day this year, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, at League Headquarters with this report.
Field Day 2026 takes place on June 27th and 28th and will bring together more than 30,000 amateur radio operators for one of the most popular on-air events in the U.S. and Canada. This year's Field Day theme is Amateur Radio, a National Resource. Combined with the ARRL Year of the Club, it provides the perfect opportunity for radio clubs to set up stations in public places to demonstrate ham radio's science, skill, and service to our communities and our nation. All of the information you need to get started can be found on the Field Day website, including how to join the ARRL Field Day Facebook group, where you can share your plans, tips, and tricks for a successful field day. The overall objective for Field Day is to contact as many stations as possible on the 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10-meter HF bands, as well as all bands above 50 megahertz, and to learn to operate in less than optimal conditions. Many clubs choose to set up in camp-style fashion with portable equipment, temporary antennas, and off-grid power sources. Field Day is open to all amateurs in the areas covered by the ARRL-RAC field organizations and countries within IARU Region 2, that's North and South America. DX stations residing in other regions may be contacted for credit but are not eligible to submit entries. Each claimed contact must include contemporaneous direct initiation by the operator on both sides of the contact. Initiations of a contact may be either locally or by remote. Also, check out the Field Day site locator page to help find participating stations near you. And as an added incentive for anyone participating in ARRL's year-long America 250 Worked All States WAS Award, contacts made with the ARRL-affiliated clubs all year, including during Field Day, will count towards your America 250 WAS-affiliated club endorsement. Check out all the details at www.arrl.org, America 250-WAS. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
For more information about ARRL Field Day, visit the ARRL Field Day webpage.
The nomination period for the 2026 spring season section manager election cycle concluded on Friday, March 6th. There will be no balloted elections because only one nominee per section was received at ARRL headquarters. Wisconsin will have a new section manager starting on July 1st, 2026. Myron Ostrick, KB9STB, was declared elected as the sole nominee. He is currently the Wisconsin Public Information Coordinator. Ostrick will take the reins of the Wisconsin Field Organization from Jason Spetz, KC9FXE of Menominee, who has been section manager since 2022. The following incumbent ARRL section managers did not face opposition and were declared elected for their upcoming new terms of office beginning July 1st, 2026. Thomas Beebe, W9RY in Illinois. Bob Burns, AK9R in Indiana. Scott Roberts, KK4ECR in Northern Florida. Scott Rosenfeld, N7JI in Oregon. And Paul Gayette, AA1SU in Vermont. Nominations will be resolicited for section manager positions in Maine and Santa Clara Valley in January 2027 because no nominating petitions were received by the deadline on March 6th. Phil Dugan, N1EP, decided not to run for another term of office as section manager of Maine, a position he has held since December of 2021. In Santa Clara Valley, James Armstrong, NV6W, decided not to run for a new term of office after serving as section manager since August of 2020.
Symbols of national pride and national identity are not being permitted at this year's World Radio Sport Team Championship. Spectators and participants can expect to see plenty of things at the World Radio Sport Team Championship event in the United Kingdom this coming July. There will be antennas, rigs, cables, microphones, and keys, and plenty of spectators to cheer on the hams using them. What will not be evident anywhere are any emblems, flags, or other symbols of national identity. The organizing committee of WRTC 2026 has reaffirmed the approach that was used during WRTC event held in 2023 in Bologna, Italy. That means that, as before, this year's teams will avoid national symbols of any kind. This is especially significant because it is consistent with the competition's qualification process, which identifies all participants by qualification area and not by their DXCC. Like the Olympics, the WRTC is held every 4 years with different host countries each time. They include Brazil, Finland, Germany, Russia, Slovenia, and in the United States, in San Francisco, Boston, and Seattle.
Actions taken in the past year by the head of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which oversees the Voice of America, have been ruled unlawful by a federal judge. Here is what happened. A federal court has ruled that Kari Lake's oversight of the agency responsible for Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and other shortwave news broadcast networks was in the position illegally. Her appointment to the post, which she gave up last November, was made last July without the customary confirmation by the U.S. Senate. Lake told the website Politico that the government intends to appeal the decision, which she strongly disagrees with. Her brief tenure was marked by firings of staff and dismissals of contractors, withholding of funds to Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Asia, and a contract with the far-right news provider One America Network.
On March 5, 2026, the FCC released a draft notice of proposed rulemaking seeking comment on proposals to expand spectrum access for in-space servicing, assembly and manufacturing, and other emergent space operations it has dubbed Weird Space Stuff. The Commission will vote on the draft NPRM at its March 26th open meeting. If adopted, comments will be due 30 days after the NPRM's publication in the Federal Register, and reply comments will be due 30 days thereafter. The draft NPRM aims to support space innovation by codifying policies to alleviate spectrum shortcomings and make spectrum abundant for emergent space operations. In particular, it proposes to broaden regulatory classifications, allowing current spectrum licensees to leverage existing spectrum assets in innovative ways and facilitate spectrum availability for emergent space operations. The FCC proposes to authorize the potential use of frequency piggybacking for ISAM and other emergent operations, which would allow spacecraft to communicate in frequency bands already authorized for use by another spacecraft while the two spacecraft are connected or working together in close proximity to each other. The draft NPRM looks to identify spectrum bands that could potentially be used more intensively, seeking comment on non-federal spectrum bands that could accommodate emergent space operations. The Commission notes that it is particularly interested in identifying bands that either are not shared with federal users or that are shared with but not used intensively by federal users and are allocated on a secondary basis for federal use. The draft NPRM proposes to add a secondary, non-federal space operations service allocation in the Earth-to-space direction in the 2030 to 2035 MHz band and permit the band's exclusive licensee, SiriusXM, to lease spectrum to Earth station operators for this purpose.
Radio Amateurs of Canada is saddened to learn about the closure of the weather radio service provided by Environment and Climate Change Canada. For decades, weather radio has been a trusted and resilient source of real-time weather alerts and public safety information for Canadians, particularly in rural, remote, and northern communities where cellular and internet coverage can be limited or unreliable. Continuous broadcast weather alerts have assisted in supporting emergency preparedness, severe weather awareness, and community resilience. Many amateur radio operators and emergency volunteers have relied on these broadcasts as part of their situational awareness during storms, wildfires, and other public safety events. RAC recognizes the evolving nature of communications technology. However, any transition away from dedicated broadcast alerting services must ensure that no Canadians are left without timely access to critical warnings. Redundancy in emergency communication systems is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Amateur radio operators across Canada remain committed to supporting emergency management partners at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels. Our volunteers stand ready to assist with communication support when conventional systems fail or become overloaded. Radio Amateurs of Canada encourages continued dialogue with government and public safety stakeholders to ensure that Canada maintains a robust, accessible, and resilient national alerting framework that serves all communities effectively.
Amazon says drones damaged 3 facilities in the UAE and Bahrain. The incidents occurred on Sunday morning, with Amazon Web Services saying at the time that objects had hit a data center in the UAE, creating sparks and fire. Also on Sunday, Amazon Web Services said it was investigating power and connectivity issues at a facility in Bahrain. On Monday, the company confirmed that drone strikes had caused the outages. 2 UAE facilities were hit directly, while in Bahrain, a drone strike in close proximity to one of our facilities caused physical impacts to our infrastructure. The company said the drones caused structural damage, disrupted power delivery to infrastructure, and in some cases required fire suppression activities that resulted in additional water damage. The incidents highlight the vulnerability of key technology infrastructure like data centers during military conflicts.
The FCC Amateur Radio Technician Class license is now an approved industry credential in the state of Tennessee. The certification has been placed as Tier 1 recognized and will be included on the 2026-27 statewide industry credential list. Stephanie Kelly, Director of Credentialing and Post-Secondary Success, Division of Post-Secondary, Workforce CTE, and Military Readiness for the Tennessee Department of Education, said this certification will benefit students throughout the state. Students across the state will have access to high-value, industry-recognized credentials that support strong post-secondary and workforce pathways. The statewide industry credential program promotes credentials for grade K through 12 students through a structured process that allows for the submission of credentials for review by various agencies. The program is designed to enhance post-secondary articulation and provide students with certification, credentials, and degrees in high-skilled and high-wage industries. The initial application was submitted by Riverside High School teacher Justin McLean, KQ4ANJ. We sincerely look forward to the next steps in getting students licensed, on the air, and learning with all the benefits and applications in amateur radio, said McLean. For tower climber Denny Todd, KC7RBK, there's only one required tool: fear. With more on this behind-the-scenes story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this report.
Todd, now 86 years old, has been climbing towers for 70 years. His first was in South Dakota when he was 16 to put up an antenna so residents there could receive stations from Omaha, Nebraska, 90 miles away. His climbing career was influenced by an interest in science and radio. His father was an engineer at a local AM station, and once he was up in the air, Denny never looked back or down. The fear to me meant I had to do everything, take every precaution to climb safely, said Todd. Then he was also involved in helicopter-assisted work on high towers. You climb up a section of tower while a chopper flies in either with another section of tower or an antenna that needs to be attached. And he said it's a little scary trying to insert the bolts and tighten the nuts at the same time the aircraft is hovering above. In 1962, after earning an associate degree in electrical engineering from Central Technical Institute and his FCC first-class radio telephone license, Todd began working for South Dakota Public Television and in 1966 became the assistant director of engineering. For the past 25 years, he has worked with his partner, Lynn Layton, KG7PTC, also an accomplished tower climber and amateur radio operator. Last month, Todd and Layton went to Las Vegas for the convention of the National Association of Tower Erectors. That's NATE, of which Todd was a founding member back in 1995. NATE is a nonprofit trade organization dedicated to providing a unified voice for companies in the diverse tower and communications infrastructure construction, service, and maintenance industries. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Todd tried to retire in 1978, but that didn't work. So when does he plan to stop climbing? When I lay down for my dirt nap, he chuckled.
NASA astronaut Mike Finka, KE-5 AIT, Crew 11 pilot and commander of the International Space Station's Expedition 74, has revealed that it was his medical issue that prompted the evacuation of the 4 Crew 11 astronauts from the space station in January. The exact nature of his ailment remains undisclosed, but Finka's statement clarified that the issue, while not considered an emergency, required advanced medical imaging not available on the space station. As a result, Finka and his crewmates, NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, KJ-5CMN, Japanese Space Agency astronaut Kamiya Yui, KG-5BPH, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov returned to Earth aboard the Crew Dragon Endeavour on January 15th, about a month earlier than originally planned. The issue arose on January 7th while Finka and Cardman were preparing for an upcoming spacewalk. The agency is monitoring a medical concern with a crew member that arose Wednesday afternoon aboard the orbital complex, NASA officials said in an emailed statement on January 7th, declining to elaborate on the nature of that concern or the astronaut it affected. Then, on January 8th, the agency announced that Crew 11 would end early so the issue could be addressed here on Earth. Crew 11 splashed down aboard Endeavour in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego on January 15th, leaving a skeleton crew of 3 aboard the ISS. SpaceX's Crew 12 mission was originally slated to launch in mid-February, with a typical handover period between them and Crew 11 expected after their arrival in low Earth orbit, allowing the newcomers time to acclimate to microgravity and life aboard the station. Efforts by SpaceX and NASA allowed for an earlier target date of their Falcon 9 launch aboard Crew Dragon Freedom, which lifted off February 13th and returned the ISS to its regular crew complement of 7.
While hams around the United States remain optimistic over the hoped-for passage of a national law that would prevent homeowners associations from restricting residents' amateur radio equipment, Indiana's governor has signed a new law to provide such protection for hams throughout the state. Starting on July 1st, amateur radio antennas, towers, and feed lines cannot be restricted by homeowner associations in residential communities in Indiana. A new law signed by Governor Mike Braun will afford hams such protection on any property they rent, lease, or own within the association's purview. This is not a green light for all amateurs, however. According to the measure's language on the Indiana General Assembly website, House Bill number 1152 will only apply to homeowners associations that are formed or create documents containing such restrictions after June 30th, 2026. Meanwhile, at the federal level, the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act, which would create protections nationwide, remains stalled in Washington, D.C. According to the website govtrack.us, the bill was introduced into committee on February 6, where it must be considered and voted on before it can move along to either of the 2 main houses of Congress.
The Wireless Institute of Australia's Technical Advisory Committee has fine-tuned its recommendations for changes to the amateur radio band plan after reviewing more than 36 submissions. It is now recommending that the emergency communications channel on 40 meters be aligned with International Amateur Radio Union Region 3 on 7.110 MHz, that the SSB portion of the 6 meters band be widened, and that 1.87 MHz and 3.686 MHz be chosen as the AM centers of activity for 160 meters and 80 meters. The committee's full document, which reaffirms its other original proposals and clarifies use of the FM analog ATV band, has been published online. Visit the consultation webpage for more information.
Wrapping up another year of action taken against unlicensed radio broadcasters in the U.S., the FCC recently submitted a report to federal lawmakers summing up its enforcement activities in the fiscal year 2025. Since Congress enacted the Pirate Act, an acronym for Preventing Illegal Radio Abuse Through Enforcement, the Federal Communications Commission has been responsible for reporting its annual activities with the enhanced power it was given in the year 2020. Its most recent report covers the government's fiscal year of 2025, which ran from October 1 of 24 through September 30 of 25. According to the report, the FCC issued 28 notices to property owners or managers for permitting illegal broadcasts from their premises. 17 of those were directly related to one of the so-called pirate sweeps that the FCC conducts, concentrating in 5 markets found to have the most pirate stations. In the same period, the FCC went directly after radio operators themselves, issuing 6 forfeiture orders and 10 notices of apparent liability for forfeiture. Separately, it entered into 3 consent agreements with radio pirates. Each agreement contained a 20-year compliance plan. It's not known what the total monetary penalties will ultimately be for any violations issued, even though the amount specified in the General Pirate Act have increased over the year. Adjusted for inflation, the penalties now carry a maximum of $122,000 per day. Although the FCC is responsible for these enforcement actions, the agency does not collect the amounts. That task is given to the U.S. Department of Justice.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. Last week, I mentioned that there was a new digital mode based on the FT4 and FT8 modes developed by Joe Taylor, K1JT, and his team. I now have a clarification on this new digital mode. K1JT Joe Taylor released a statement earlier this week about the, quote, new FT2 mode. Basically, Dr. Taylor wrote, quote, despite what you may have read, quote, this innovative protocol was developed from scratch by Martino and the ARI Caserta team, end quote. The mode recently being called FT2 is nothing more than FT4 sent at twice the speed. Indeed, the FT2 offered by DG2YCB in an experimental WSJTX version uses the exact FT4 software and simply scales the generated and received waveforms by a factor of 2. Compared with FT4, FT2 is significantly less sensitive, needs twice the bandwidth, and has far more decoding features caused by timing errors. This mode is hardly usable without full or nearly full automation, end quote. Dr. Taylor continued, we are, however, experimenting with a possible asynchronous mode that would be operationally more like traditional RTTY. It's too soon to say when or if it might be released for wider testing, end quote. Well, thank you, Joe, for that clarification. We want to make sure we always get it right. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Well, let's start with an update on 3Y0K DXpedition from Bouvet. So this is from the town of Bouvetoya, March 10th, 2026. While the previous day's weathers had been good, current weather at Bouvetoya has strong winds at 25 meters per second and rain, and we have difficulties to even walk and stand up while outdoor. The 160-meter antenna broke today, and the 20-meter Yagi is also damaged and not in use. We have spare parts ready for the antennas, but currently it is deemed unsafe to raise the Yagi in the strong wind. We will get it up as soon as the weather allows for it. One of the smaller tents is also damaged in the adverse weather. For radio and sleeping, we have large and solid tents from Arctic Lavo in Norway. These have proven to withstand strong winds also during the previous 3Y0J trip, and so far we've had no issues with them. The damages so far won't impact the operation. We have backups that will be installed should we experience even more damage. The current forecast is that we will have this weather until the weekend, so more action is possible. Today, we've had some food delivered from the vessel in the morning. It is not every day that you order a pizza to be delivered by helicopter to Buvatoya. This was welcomed by the operators who have eaten MREs since they arrived on Saturday, the 28th of February, to give you this new band slot. Each day we have 3 MRE meals from a Norwegian manufacturer. We do have a social tent where we meet for the meals and talk not only about radio, but other things. The daily routine is that we have 6-hour shift rotations in a schedule so that we can work during different time slots and experience various propagation and bands. Last night there was a good opening on 160 meters, so it is a priority to get this antenna up when weather allows. We currently have 6 to 7 stations up and running, and will keep this until the weekend. It is likely we will see a partial teardown if there is a weather window this weekend or early next week. We will plan to stay as long as possible next week, but the weather windows will dictate when we must return to the vessel. We have currently logged more than 70,000 contacts, and we thank everyone for being in the pileup. 73 from the 3Y0K team. And well done to those guys. I know it's been a challenge, and I know there's been a lot of issues on the bands, but they have persevered and really done a nice job, so congratulations. And we have another de-expedition that's actually going gangbusters, and that's the guys that are activating Guinea-Bissau, which is J5. As of Monday, they had made 164,500 QSOs with 31,600 different call signs in 10.9 days of operation. As of this writing at 1930 UTC, the number of QSOs logged had increased to 168,000. There are still 9 days to go. They experienced a 30-minute generator outage yesterday, but apart from that, operation is going on smoothly. Earlier this week, they reported that they had repaired the neighbor's water pump after having previously resolved the noise issue with the same neighbor's solar system. They also reported that they would be on 80-meter single sideband, but not on 160 or 60. And if you haven't worked them, you just haven't had your radio on, because they have been everywhere and doing just a great job. That's a tremendous number of QSOs. From Vanuatu, which is Yankee Juliet, Chris, Victor Kilo 2, Yankee Uniform Sierra, plans an operation as YJ0CA. He will be at Port Vila March 18th to the 2nd, so in just a few days. Single sideband only. The same gear as previously, an IC7300 to a small amplifier and simple wire antennas, 40 through 10 meters. He says his main operating times will likely be between 2100 and 1000 Zulu. Chris logs on paper and then has a high-quality physical card for confirmation. Cards will be sent out airmail in April from Australia. Check QRZ.com for details and QSL addresses. So we still have an ongoing operation from St. Bart's, which is Fox Juliet. Andreas, Delta Kilo 6 Alpha Sierra, is now active from St. Bart's as Fox Juliet / Delta Kilo 6 Alpha Sierra for the month of March. He has QRV on CW, FT4, and FT8 on 80 through 6 meters, including participation in the ARL International DXCW contest, which was last weekend. QSL via Delta Kilo 6 Alpha Sierra, either direct or via the Bureau. Juliet Delta 1 / M, which is Minami Torishima. Taki, Juliet Golf 8, November, Quebec, Juliet, will be working again on Minami Torishimi as Juliet Golf 8, November, Quebec, Juliet / JD1, now until mid-May, operating with 50 watts and an HB9 CV style 17 and 15 meter 2-element antenna. And you can QSL that via JA8CJY. From Anguilla, we have this, Victor Popper 2 Echo, Jack, Mike 0 PLX, SP9 FIH, and SQ2 RAD are QRV from Anguilla until March 22nd. They will use the call signs VP2 ELX, VP2 EWE, and VP2 EAD respectively. Their activities will cover 160 through 6 meters, with each operator focusing on specific frequencies. Jack will concentrate on 15, 40, and 80 sideband. Operations will take place on sideband and CW, allowing multiple transceivers, amplifiers, and both verticals and directional antennas to be used. During the 3-week stay, Jack also plans short sightseeing and possible radio activities from St. Martin, which is FS, Saba, which is Papa Juliet 6, and St. Bart's, which we mentioned a minute ago, which is Fox Juliet. Well, we always talk about those things that were planned and successful and how they're going. And here's one that did not. And, these things get canceled for a variety of reasons. I was looking forward to these guys. This is Zulu Charlie 4, which is the UK sovereign base area on Cyprus. The planned ZC4C and ZC4Z trip to Cyprus was canceled by the travel company just 12 hours before departure, leaving the group deeply disappointed. Attempts to rebook flights were unsuccessful due to limited availability and ongoing travel restrictions. The team, who had remained determined to travel despite recent safety concerns, is now seeking an extension to their license to reschedule for a later date. After a year of preparation, the sudden cancellation is a significant letdown. I can't imagine planning over a year for something and then 12 hours before I take off, it's canceled. I sure hope they can get their money back, and I sure hope they can reschedule. So here's an update on the South Orkney Islands, which is Victor Papa 0/0. Sergeant Ramon Alberto Martinez will operate as LU-1 Delta Mike Zulu/Zulu from the LU-1ZA station at Orcadas Antarctica Base on Lowry Island, South Orkney Islands through 2026. The South Orcadas Base, established in 1904, is the oldest Antarctic base. In 1927, the first all-Argentine crew, led by Jose Maneta, arrived, and the first official radio telegraph station in Antarctica was opened. Since 1951, the Orcadas Observatory has been under the Argentine Navy as the South Orcada Naval Detachment. And stand by for more details, but that will be a good one to get in the log. We have Namibia on the air, Victor 5. Gunter, Delta Kilo 2 Whiskey Hotel, is currently operating as Victor 51 Whiskey Hotel from a farm near Omaruru, Namibia, and will remain active until March 24th, covering frequencies from 160 to 6 meters, including 60 meters. And I've heard Gunter, I haven't worked him yet, but he's got very good signal, so give him a shout. And finally, from the Austral Islands, we have Fox Ocean Stroke Alpha. The excitement is mounting, just over a week to go until departure, so they're on their way. From the TX5 EU group, a lot of prep work is done, extensive radios, antennas, spare parts, etc. Everything has been planned in detail, tested, and packed. The German and Dutch ops have been meeting regularly, mostly on video conference. Today, the 6 ops from Germany and the Netherlands will meet at the airport in Paris and fly to San Francisco and onward to Austral Islands, today being March 11th. They expect to be on the air March 13th, with operations continuing to March 25th, and I can't wait for those guys. This week, the DX Mentor YouTube channel episode will feature Sven, Delta Juliet 4 Mike X-Ray, as he's discussing his upcoming Sugar 21 Whiskey Delta DXpedition to Bangladesh, as well as the Next Generation DX Association. Please give it a look and let me know what you think. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
Hello, and welcome to the next chapter of Philip Neglinger, KA4KOE's Dead Electrical Dudes, in which he takes an off-the-beaten-track look at the movers and shakers that helped grow our amateur radio hobby and other radio-related stuff. Philip has presented these dudes on EHAM over the last several years and has given us permission to use them here on This Week in Amateur Radio. And so we continue with Dead Electrical Dudes number 6. This month's stiff, Count Alessandro Giuseppe Antonio Anastasio Volta. Whew! Entered mortal coil 8 February 1745. Assumed room temperature 5 March 1827. The webpage shows a portrait of Count Volta holding a book. Signore Artiste, how long must I hold up this book? Philip looks upon these old posed portraits with skepticism. By that, how long did Mr. Volta have to hold that book for this painting? Perhaps Volta's friend and contemporary, Mr. Luigi Galvani, better known as the Frog Torturer, would have gladly offered to shock his biceps to help with these nasty music cramps. Anyway, Philip digresses. Every time you fumble around in the dark during a power outage, cursing because the flashlight doesn't work, or are stranded because the darn car won't crank, or lose all the memories and or operating parameters in your HF radio's volatile memory, or you're simply caught flat-footed on Christmas morning as your child cries because his new super destructor evil doom machine is only a piece of inanimate plastic, it's all because we have come to rely on a relatively ubiquitous piece of technology referred to technically as the voltaic cell. But almost 200 years ago, this invention literally and figuratively shocked the scientific world. Philip apologizes. This was too hard to resist. Signore Volta was born of nobility. At the age of only 14, young Alessandro set his life's course when he decided his career would be in the field of physics with an emphasis on electricity. By 1778, the young scientist had isolated methane in the laboratory. He should have visited a nearby cow pasture, in Philip's opinion, for fresh samples of the gas. Volta also invented a static charge accumulator, which is the basis of modern capacitors. Such was Alessandro's success in his endeavors that he was awarded the Copley Medal by the Royal Society in 1791. Greater things and discoveries, however, were to come. Back to Luigi Galvani. Volta's friend had been experimenting with the phenomena of what he termed animal electricity. Galvani had inserted electrodes of differing metals into a frog's legs, which resulted in muscular contractions. In essence, the frog juice was an electrolyte. Luigi thought he was providing a path for the natural animal electricity. Volta read and discussed his friend's finding, disagreed with Luigi good-naturedly, and investigated further. Volta removed the frog, used alternating discs of copper and zinc, and inserted absorbent cardboard pads between the discs, which were impregnated with a suitable solution of salts or acid. In 1800, he stacked many of these discs together, a battery of them, so to speak, and was greeted with success. The potential generated by only 20 of these discs was enough to inflict pain. Napoleon Bonaparte requested a command performance of Alessandro in 1801 for a personal demonstration of the device. So impressed was the potentate with the pile of discs that Volta was eventually made a count. This invention was also referred to as the voltaic pile. For Volta's work, the unit of electromotive force, the volt, designated by either the symbols E or V, was named after him. Signed, Philip Nettlinger, P.E., Ka4KOE. With our appreciation to Philip Nettlinger, K4KOE, for allowing us to use his materials, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Still excited from my minor victory in discovering a missing puzzle piece associated with the project I'm working on, I spent the past week introducing my head, if not literally at least figuratively, to the surface of my desk in a traditional head-desk troubleshooting move that you might be familiar with. I suppose it's an improvement on the bear with a toothache approach. In short, the yak is losing hair, rapidly. You might be wondering why I'm telling you about it, since in the land of milk and honey nothing ever goes wrong and all the answers are presented on a silver platter, except when they're not. Within the amateur radio community, it appears to me that the inclination to fiddle is ingrained and widespread. Given that the hobby is all about experimentation and learning, that's not a bad thing. But there are times when this behavior can be counterproductive, specifically when you're troubleshooting. Faced with a problem, there are times when a systematic approach is warranted. For some, the first time they come across this phenomenon is during the practical test component of their amateur radio license. Presented with the station, they're asked to determine why it's not working. The problem might be a power supply that isn't plugged in, or a disconnected antenna, the mode button set to FM, the squelch closed, the RF gain set to 0, generally something simple. Those inexperienced in the art of troubleshooting are more likely than not inclined to try everything, sometimes all at once, in the hope that one of the changes will magically fix the issue, but in reality often making the problem worse. There is a better way. I'm mentioning this because this skill applies to many aspects of life, and in the decades that I've been here, it's not something I was ever taught. It's funny to think that a quote from nearly a century ago applies to this skill. When you have eliminated all which is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. The salient point being eliminating all which is impossible. In other words, you're not finding the problem, you're eliminating all the things that are not the problem. Another way is to think of it as finding all the things that don't need fixing. While that might sound weird, in deeply interdependent systems like an amateur radio station or a computer, that approach can help you find the root cause of an issue, and with it, the path to a potential fix. Of course, this process invites you to examine where the issue might exist. Experience will teach you that you need to start small and grow the net, rather than cast wide and narrow it down. That's not to say that you need to stop paying attention to the bigger picture. In the example of an inoperative station, you might discover that the lights in the room are out and that this coincides with the radio being off. In other words, trying to discover if the antenna is disconnected makes little sense, since there's no power to the radio. In my case, I'm balancing my efforts between maintaining an existing system whilst attempting to deploy a new one to replace it. I'm working on several related issues on multiple fronts. Their common theme is audio, though the specifics differ depending on which computer I'm looking at. Then there's the installation and ongoing care and maintenance associated with keeping GNU radio running. It's a balancing act because while this is happening, I still need to look for work, respond to email, deal with the regulatory requirements for accounting and tax returns, not to mention the myriad projects I have going on at any given time. At this point, I could go into deep and disturbing detail about the technology issues I'm juggling, and I could even justify it by pointing out that a problem shared is a problem halved, but truth be told, I'm not sure you're up for a treatise on the comings and goings of forced system security updates and arising bugs. And just so we're clear, this is not the company who brought us a talking paperclip. It's the one who gave rise to companies called Orange and Lemon. On the GNU radio front, there's a snake-based installer that happily installs two incompatible libraries for the same application, causing it to fail, and a beer-related one that fails to install dependencies. At least I can use apt-get on a real system. That said, juggling problems and all, I did manage to actually hear an FM station being decoded across the network. It did help that I actually connected the antenna to the radio, and I'm ignoring the audio buffer underruns or overruns depending on the weather, or some other unknowable variable, but I suspect that's all part of the learning I'm in the middle of. Hopefully the hair will grow back soon. I'm on Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. A new 6U CubeSat has been deployed from the ISS. It is Ten-Koh 2, constructed by Nihon University in Japan. It boosted itself to a 500-kilometer circular orbit where it will remain for about 3 months. The linear transponder has an uplink on 145.895 through 145.935 MHz and a downlink on 435.875 through 435.915 MHz. After initial testing of all the systems, it will be operational 2 days per week. A schedule will be announced. Digital images will be transmitted on 435.895 MHz. This frequency will also be used by the Digitalker with preloaded audio. It has a 5.8 GHz using 38.4 kbps in 4 FSK. For now, Ten-Koh 2 can be found as object HTV-X1 if you're looking for the TLEs. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for the weekly solar weather and terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar activity was very low to low. Only low-level C-class activity was observed from regions 4384 and 4389. Slight growth was observed in regions 4384 and 4391. New region 4392 was numbered. The rest of the spot groups were either stable or in decay. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed. Solar activity is expected to remain at low levels with a slight chance for M-class minor to moderate flares through March 14th. Solar wind parameters were enhanced through March 11th. Solar wind speed ranged from approximately 480 to 570 kilometers per second during this time, but decreased to around 400 to 460 kilometers per second through the rest of the monitoring period. Near nominal levels are expected to return on March 12th before enhancements are again expected around midday on March 13th due to the onset of a positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream. High-speed stream activity will persist through March 14th. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Carl Lewetzel-Swab K9LA. And remember, for customizable propagation charts, you can visit the Voice of America CAP online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, March 14th, the YVDX RIDI contest, that's digital. March 14th and 15th, the SARL VHF UHF FM contest, that's phone. March 14th to 15th, the SARL Field Day contest, CW phone and digital. Also on the 14th and 15th, the Commonwealth BERU contest, that's CW. The 14th and the 15th, the DIG QSO party, single sideband and phone. And on March 14th and 15th, the EAPSK 63 contest, that is digital. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on March 15th, Winterfest 2026, the National Capital Area Ham Radio Fair, ARRL Virginia State Convention in Vienna, Virginia. March 21st, St. Patrick's Day Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL West Texas Section Convention, that's in Midland, Texas. And on March 28th, the Central Dakota Amateur Radio Club Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL North Dakota State Convention, that's in Bismarck, North Dakota. And don't forget to remember to search the ARRL Ham Fest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
Clublog, a popular database used by DXers, is gaining 2 new volunteers to help with the growing website. To tell us more about the changes at Clublog, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who has the details.
Tony Ryder, G6GLP, and Colin Wilson, G3VCQ, have joined the project to help support its expanding worldwide user base. Clublog is an online service for amateur radio operators providing log analysis, DXCC tracking, DXpedition support tools, and online QSL request. Currently, more than 132,000 call signs are registered in the system, contributing to an extraordinary 1.3 billion QSOs for analysis. Every day, thousands of new logs are uploaded, reflecting constant activity from operators across every continent. Ryder and Wilson are joining a dedicated volunteer group that includes Alan Judd, 5B4AHJ, who maintains the club's highly detailed DXCC database, Marcus Nicolich, 5B4WN, author of the Expedition Tools and OQRS system used by DXpeditions worldwide, and help desk volunteer Dick Hadaway, W4PID. Clublog has always been built by volunteers, and its success comes directly from people who care about helping the amateur radio community, said founder Michael Wells, G7VJR. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
With such a large global audience of users, support is more important than ever. It's fantastic to welcome Tony and Colin to the team, said Wells, as I know their friendly and helpful style will be so appreciated by our users. I'm immensely grateful for their willingness to contribute their time and expertise.
A hot air balloon with 2 passengers aboard was blown into a cell phone tower standing 925 feet, or more than 280 meters, high in Longview, a city east of Dallas, Texas. The crash on February 28th left the 2 passengers dangling near the top of the tower as the balloon became entangled in its guy cables. Emergency crews from police and fire departments responded. As rescuers climbed using several ropes, they battled the same strong winds that had led to the crash, working for more than an hour to free the passengers. In what was deemed a rare, high-risk operation, they were brought down safely. The scene in Texas was reminiscent of an incident in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2024, when a hot air balloon crashed into the tower of radio station KKOB AM. The 3 passengers on board that balloon were also rescued safely.
In Branson, Missouri, Skywarn Youth, a group of young amateur radio operators dedicated to weather spotting, emergency communication, and community education, will operate special event station N0A for the next 2 weeks to promote severe weather awareness. N0A will operate March 15th through the 29th, 2026 at various times, day and night, as time permits, using single sideband and FT8, FT4 on 80, 40, 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters, as well as FT8 on 160 and 30 meters. For operators without HF access, Skywarn Youth invites check-ins to their weekly nets on Sundays, March 15th to the 22nd and the 29th at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, via multiple repeaters and VoIP networks. All check-ins to those nets will officially be added to the N0A special event log. Being prepared and establishing situational awareness during severe weather events is crucial and will help you and your family to stay safe, said Skywarn Youth Net Manager Caleb Safair, KE0FOE. Our goal with this special event station is to educate the amateur radio community about the dangers of severe weather and the importance of being prepared. All amateur radio operators are encouraged to spread the word and participate in this effort to strengthen weather safety networks worldwide. More information is available at www.skywarnyouth.net.
It's the year of the club, and the second annual ARRL Ham Radio Open House in April offers a chance to show off your club's high-tech gear and skills to your community. ARRL is encouraging radio clubs and schools to promote amateur radio science and technology by opening their stations to the public with an open house during the month of April. In addition, groups are encouraged to set up in public places or conduct outdoor activities, such as parks on the air, activations, or satellite contacts. The open house event is built around World Amateur Radio Day on Saturday, April 18th, but your open house may be scheduled at any point in the month.
It is the beginning of a new month, and that means it is time for the monthly Volunteer Monitoring Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is this month's activity report of the VM program. An operator in Wisconsin was issued an advisory notice concerning a beacon on a 60-meter frequency not authorized to U.S. operators. A technician operator in California was issued an advisory notice for 20-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. An operator in Washington was issued an advisory notice for repeatedly transmitting free DV digital software on 40 meters and refusing to vacate the frequency when requested. An operator in New York was issued an advisory notice for interference with the Jamaica emergency net on 20 meters. Another operator in New York was issued an advisory notice for deliberate interference with amateur operators on 20 meters and for using CB equipment on the amateur frequencies. An operator in Chesterfield, Virginia received a commendation for providing assistance to new licensees, one of which was 11 years old, and donating radio equipment and installation and operation assistance to get the new licensees on 10 meters. There was one meeting and the FCC accepted HF cases in North Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia, and Missouri for enforcement sanctions. A new automated FT8 monitoring system was implemented in January and is undergoing testing. It will randomly monitor FT8 and FT4 frequencies to ensure that the operators hold the proper license class for the band that they are using. A technician operator in Indiana was issued an advisory concerning 20 and 40 meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. Operators in Georgia and Kentucky were issued advisories regarding improperly wide signals on 3.927 MHz. That resulted in splatter over 8 kHz. Section 97.307, Subpart A of the Commission's rule states, No amateur station transmission shall occupy more bandwidth than necessary for the information rate and emission type being transmitted in accordance with good amateur practice. A general class operator in Ohio was issued an advisory for operation on 14.225 MHz, too close to the band edge. General class operators in Connecticut and Maine were issued advisories for single sideband operation on 20 meters outside of the general class allocation. A technician operator in Illinois was issued an advisory for SSB operation on 20 meters, again a band on which technicians have no privileges. An amateur radio club in California was issued an advisory for operation with an expired license. An amateur extra class operator in California was issued an advisory for SSB operation on 14.126 MHz during a DX contest. SSB operation is not allowed on 20 meters below 14.150 MHz. A station in South Carolina was issued an advisory for failure to identify for more than 50 minutes on 2 occasions on 40 meters. Section 97.119 Subpart A requires amateur stations to transmit their assigned call sign at the end of each communication and at least every 10 minutes during a communication. And finally, an operator in Colorado received a commendation for efficiency and courtesy while managing the Colorado Severe Weather Net on the 448.400 MHz repeater. An operator in Ohio received a commendation for exceptional courtesy during a Parks on the Air operation, giving the frequency to a scheduled net operation. The totals for this month's monitoring were 1,370 hours on HF frequencies, 1,097 hours on VHF frequencies and above, plus 42 other monitoring hours, for a total of 2,509 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
You are invited to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 by joining the FCC's latest webinars. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 contributed significantly to improved lives for people with disabilities with specific accessibility mandates for video programming and telephone equipment and services. Tuesday, March 17th, 12 to 2:30 p.m., webinar is What Did We Learn? Congressional passage of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 and the subsequent FCC implementation was the last major effort by the federal government to construct a new regulatory framework for the technology, media, and telecommunications sector. Those actions drove competition, innovation, and investment into faster, better, and cheaper technology to increase economic growth and expand connectivity for consumers. At a moment when innovation is accelerating at an ever-increasing pace, the critical issues regulators currently face include artificial intelligence, media, competition, convergence, access, and cybersecurity. FCC Commissioner Ana M. Gomez will host panel conversations featuring communications and technology policy experts that lived through the creation and implementation of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. The purpose of these panels is to consider how lessons from 30 years ago can be used to drive innovation and competition for the benefit of consumers today. This webinar will be sign language interpreted and captioned. Other reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available on request. Email your request to fcc504@fcc.gov. Registration is not necessary.
Well, most every DX chaser's eyes have been on Bouvet Island in the South Atlantic lately. Another DXpedition planned for later this month has taken on new importance. New restrictions will be enforced soon and are expected to limit access there. The Rebel DX groups plan to operate as T31TTT this month from Canton Island. Could well be the last for amateur radio for a long time, according to a report from organizers on the website DX World. Dom, 3D2USU, said the nation's fishery and environmental officials have put into place a full array of costs affecting visitors. He said the new permit fees and other requirements will impose a great financial burden on teams. De-expeditioners will need to provide accommodations, food, and transportation for 4 government officials who will need to be present on any future visits to Canton. He says that in simple terms, future Canton Island de-expeditions will cost around $200,000, which makes T-31 prohibitive. The obstacles are not unlike some of the restrictions the same group of operators face for its hoped-for trip to Conway Reef, 3D2/C. Since Rebel DX's 2024 operation there in May of 2024, Fiji's Ministry of Fisheries has begun moving towards declaring it a restricted access zone. Meanwhile, the de-expeditioners are hoping to get Canton Island and be on the air sometime around March 25.
Although space technology may not have been officially introduced into the kingdom's standard curriculum, the topic is taking center stage at the National Polytechnic Institute of Cambodia at the second session of the MPIC SCT event, QO100, and LEO satellite training, igniting a passion for space communication among students. The training from February 26th to March 3rd was transforming the campus into a hub of innovation. Building on their past success of a 12,076-kilometer transmission to Antarctica via the QO100 satellite, this year's training elevates the challenge by focusing on low Earth orbit, or LEO, satellites. Students are actively engaged in hands-on learning, constructing and utilizing homemade antenna systems to track these fast-moving satellites across the sky, according to organizers. International specialists from Japan, France, and Australia are providing mentorship, guiding students through the complexities of installing ground stations and communicating with a variety of satellites, including the geostationary QO100 and low Earth orbit satellites like RS-44 and SO-50. I wanted to show Cambodian students that space technology is accessible. Watching them successfully track a low Earth orbit satellite today proves that our youth are ready for the future, says Jorge Paulo, a French marine electronics and telecommunications system expert. Mori Makio, an amateur radio satellite technician from Japan, emphasized the event's impact, highlighting how the real success is not just in the technical milestones, but in witnessing the passion of the participants. Seeing students successfully track low Earth orbit satellites with homemade antennas is a powerful reminder of why this event exists, he said. Red Semvisoth, one of the organizing committee members, shared his satisfaction with their efforts. He said that the months of planning and coordination went into bringing this international training to life.
The third time was not the charm for Space One's Kairos rocket. Kairos launched for the third time ever on Thursday, March 5th, lifting off from Space One's Spaceport Key in Wakayama Prefecture at 02:10 UTC or 11:10 a.m. local time in Japan. But it was all over 2 minutes later. Kairos number 3 was launched, but we determined that mission success was difficult and implemented flight termination procedures, Tokyo-based Space One said via X on Wednesday evening in Japanese translated by X. Among the Kairos number 3 payloads was NutSat-3, a 3U CubeSat created with support from National Formosa University and dedicated to amateur radio service. The satellite was designed to provide FM voice repeater, APRS, and telemetry services to the global amateur satellite community. In addition to the amateur radio mission, the NutSat-3 project was to have actively engaged students in mission data analysis, RF design performance of satellite radio communications, and community participation by encouraging public engagement through open telemetry data.
The Fort Myers Amateur Radio Club in Florida will be hosting the return of Ham Waves of History, a live commemorative amateur radio event taking place from March 17th through the 19th, 2026. This tribute honors the men and women who served at Buckingham Army Airfield during World War II, a site that was once the largest airfield in Florida. The public is invited to visit. Admission is free. During the event, FMARC operators will operate live with an event call sign of W4LX from the historic grounds where nearly 50,000 gunners graduated to defend Allied bombers in the skies over Europe and the Pacific. Visitors can watch operators use modern and vintage radio technology to connect with other enthusiasts worldwide, sharing the story of Buckingham's pivotal role in achieving Allied air superiority.
Hams in the Australian state of New South Wales are worried that they will no longer be able to afford their vital repeater sites. Faced with fee hikes on state-owned land, known as Crown Land, They say they simply aren't budgeted for extra expense. Amateurs in New South Wales are troubled by what they believe are prohibitive fee hikes recently put in place for access to Crown land. Calling the situation unsustainable for amateur repeaters and other equipment installed there, the president of the Goulburn and Southern Highlands Amateur Radio Society has written a letter to the ham clubs around the state urging members to contact their members of parliament. In his open letter to the clubs, Peter Chatwin, VK2PET, the Radio Society's president, noted that new or continued access to elevated Crown land sites for repeaters and towers could cost clubs as much as 20,000 AU per annum. Peter said that the hams need to substantiate their own club's financial hardship by forwarding examples to Steve Cook, member of the Cootamundra and Shadow Minister for Crown Lands. Peter wrote, "It is important that we provide genuine, practical examples of how these costs are affecting clubs across New South Wales." He said that groups in rural areas, as well as those providing emergency communications and training, rely on robust, functioning networks that include these sites.
A Japanese amateur radio satellite launched to the International Space Station last October will soon be deployed in a higher orbit. After delivering about 12,000 pounds of cargo to the ISS for NASA and its international partners, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's uncrewed HTV-X1 cargo spacecraft departed the ISS on Friday, March 6. The spacecraft arrived at the space station on October 29 after launching an H-3 rocket from Japan's Tagashima Space Center. The HTV-X1 spacecraft will boost itself to a 500-kilometer circular orbit, where it will remain for more than 3 months, acting as a scientific platform for JAXA's experiment. After attaining the higher orbit, the HTV-X1 will deploy Ten-Koh 2, a 6U CubeSat constructed by Nihon University, carrying a variety of amateur radio experiments. These will include a linear transponder developed by AMSAT, scheduled to be announced with a feature of an uplink in the range of 145.895 and downlink on 435.875. Digitalker with a preloaded audio will be transmitted on 435.895. Transmission of the preloaded digital images created in cooperation with students from the Faculty of Arts will also be at 435.895. Demonstration of the microwave band communication technology at 5.8 gigahertz in the communications radio microwave band, with tests of high-speed data transmissions at 38.4 kilobytes per second in 4 FSK. Ten-Koh 2 is expected to remain in orbit and active for approximately 1 year to 18 months.
AMSAT is offering a limited-time promotion for new and renewing members that includes a free digital copy of Getting Started with Amateur Satellites. The promotion is being offered as AMSAT begins the 2026 membership year. Anyone who joins or renews their AMSAT membership during the promotional period will receive a download link for the latest edition of Getting Started with Amateur Radio Satellites in their membership confirmation email. The guide is designed to help radio amateurs understand the fundamentals of satellite operation and serves as a practical reference for both newcomers and operators returning to the hobby. Additional information about AMSAT membership is available at launch.amsat.org. In addition to this limited-time promotion, AMSAT membership includes a subscription to the AMSAT Journal, access to archived issues, discounts on selected items in the AMSAT online store, and opportunities to participate in AMSAT elections, committees, awards programs, and other AMSAT activities and programs. Members may also access archived proceedings from past AMSAT space symposiums through the AMSAT member portal. Beyond these tangible events, AMSAT membership supports development, launch, and operation of amateur radio satellites along with education and outreach efforts. Joining AMSAT is not just about individual benefits, it is about being part of the community that builds and operates amateur satellites for radio amateurs worldwide. As AMSAT looks ahead to 2026, the promotion helps launch another year of growth and opportunity for amateur radio in space.
It is time for this weekend edition of AMSAT's Satellite Shorts from All Over. And this week we begin in Russia. In a statement on March 3rd, the Russian space agency Roscosmos said that its engineers have repaired a badly damaged launch pad at the Baikonur Cosmodrome ahead of schedule, averting a potentially longer-term problem for supplying the International Space Station. The agency said a Progress cargo capsule is now scheduled to blast off to the ISS on March 22nd. The facility suffered a still unexplained mishap last November during the launch of a Soyuz capsule carrying 2 Russians and 1 American to the orbiting station. The pad is the only location where Russia can launch its manned Soyuz capsules, which are a mainstay transport and cargo vehicle for the station. Next, NASA announced on February 19th that it had reclassified Starliner's crew flight test as a Type A mishap, the most serious kind, in the same category as the Space Shuttle Challenger and Columbia tragedies. Starliner's crew flight test launched on June 5, 2024, sending NASA astronauts Suni Williams, KD-5 PLB, and Butch Wilmore to the International Space Station for a planned 10-day stay. Starliner reached the orbiting lab safely. On the way, however, the spacecraft suffered multiple thruster failures and temporarily lost 6 degrees of freedom control, the ability to precisely maintain its desired orientation and trajectory. NASA prolonged the orbital stay of Williams and Wilmore multiple times to study Starliner's thruster issues. In the end, the agency decided to bring the capsule home uncrewed, which occurred on September 6th. Williams and Wilmore, meanwhile, stayed aboard the ISS. They came home on a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule in March of 2025, having spent about 9 months in space instead of the originally planned 10 days. Both have since retired from the agency. And finally, this note. SpaceX launched the 600th Starlink satellite of 2026 during a pre-dawn Falcon 9 rocket flight from Cape Canaveral on March 4th. The Starlink 1040 mission added another 29 broadband internet satellites into low Earth orbit.
SpaceX founder Elon Musk has suggested building a giant electromagnetic catapult on the moon to launch satellites into space, reviving a concept first explored more than 50 years ago. In early February, Musk told employees at XAI that the company could eventually establish lunar factories to build artificial intelligence satellites and launch them using electromagnetic mass driver rather than conventional rockets. Musk argued that advances in heavy lift launch capability, particularly SpaceX's Starship vehicle, could enable delivery of large amounts of cargo to the lunar surface. Once infrastructure exists, he suggested that manufacturing satellites on the moon and launching them from there could dramatically reduce cost. He also noted that in-space propellant transfer and lunar industrial development could support a permanent scientific and manufacturing presence beyond the Earth. The concept of a lunar electromagnetic launcher is not new. Physicist Gerard O'Neill proposed similar mass drivers in the 1970s as a way to fling mined lunar material into space for use in constructing orbital habitats and solar-powered satellites. Working with colleagues and student researchers at MIT, O'Neill helped build experimental prototypes demonstrating that electromagnetic acceleration could launch payloads without chemical rockets. Later designs suggested that a system only a few hundred feet long might be sufficient to send material off the moon. More recent studies have continued to explore the practicality of lunar launch systems. In a 2023 report to the U.S. Air Force Office of Scientific Research, General Atomics researcher Robert Perrine argued that modern electromagnetic launchers could be powered by abundant solar energy on the moon, eliminating the need to transport large quantities of rocket fuel from Earth. He suggested that adapting technologies such as the Navy's electromagnetic aircraft launch system could form the basis of a reliable lunar launch capability. Such systems could play a role in a broader lunar industrial ecosystem. Early lunar bases would initially depend on machinery and supplies delivered from Earth, but the long-term goal would be to use lunar resources, including silicon, aluminum, titanium, iron, and water ice, to manufacture hardware locally. Launching satellites or raw materials from the moon's weaker gravity could make resupply of lunar orbit or deep space infrastructure far more economical than launching everything from Earth. While Musk's timeline and plans remain speculative, the renewed discussion highlights growing interest in lunar manufacturing and infrastructure to support future space activity.
Hi, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN, one of the anchors for This Week in Amateur Radio, and I have a few questions. Do you have a good radio voice? Do you have a quiet recording space, own a professional broadcast microphone and DAW software, and know how to use them? Can you commit to a same-day turnaround when given a script assignment? If you answered yes to all of these questions, and you're willing to volunteer your time to give a little something back to the ham radio hobby, then lend us your voice and join our anchor team for This Week in Amateur Radio. To learn more and see if you have what it takes, contact George Bowen, W2XBS, via email at w2xbs77@gmail.com or look him up on qrz.com.
And our final story this week brings us to Haight, Ireland, where a new antenna installation has put the beloved Hurdy-Gurdy Museum station back on the air. The sun was shining above the Hurdy-Gurdy Museum of Vintage Radio as Tony, EI5EM, and Reg Shannon, a shortwave listener, started some serious antenna work on the roof of the museum's Martello Tower. They were installing a vertical HF antenna donated by Mike Keane, EI4DF, a gift that has put County Dublin's museum ham radio station, EI0MAR, back on the air just in time for April's International Marconi Day. The museum lost the use of the station after its previous antenna had been destroyed by storms. Although marked by periods of rain, Installation Day finally took place under clear skies, according to a report on the Irish Radio Transmitter's website. The tower has a celebrated role in radio history, not only because in 1902, American innovator Lee DeForest conducted experiments in wireless telegraphy, but also because it housed a Marconi receiving station that conducted ship-to-shore telegraphy experiments with the HMS Monarch.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter. AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeater systems all around the U.S. and around the world on great operations like WA0RCR from the center of the U.S., Wentzville, Missouri, where This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to be part of the legendary Gateway 160-meter net report each weekend.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.